They say some storms don't roar when they arrive. Some just slip quietly through the cracks, unnoticed at first, until everything you thought was sturdy begins to sway beneath your feet. That morning, I didn't yet know I was walking into one. I thought I was just attending a wedding. The invitation had come in a heavy cream envelope with gold embossing so thick I thought it might be bulletproof. My sister, Celia, excuse me, Celestine, as she now insisted on being called, was getting married at a place called Halberd House, an estate tucked in the rolling hills of Asheville, a place where old money and new ambition sipped from the same glass. I hadn't been there in years, not since Mother's funeral. Even before I parked my car, I could feel the weight of the day pulling at my shoulders like an old field pack. My dress was simple, deep navy with long sleeves and a structured waistline, paired with the same string of pearls our grandmother once wore when she met the Queen. A quiet defiance, really. In a sea of silk and diamonds, I preferred dignity to dazzle. The marble steps of Halberd were cold under my boots. Not heels, boots. Soft leather, low heel, polished to a silent gleam. That had been deliberate. Inside, the place glittered with chandeliers the size of my old barracks bay, and waiters wove through the crowd like practiced dancers, trays of champagne flutes balanced like weapons of seduction. A string quartet played something light and expensive in the corner, like background music for people who never heard silence unless they paid for it. I caught sight of Celestine almost immediately. She stood in the center of the foyer beneath the largest chandelier, laughing with her mouth open too wide, like someone trying to prove she belonged in a world that never quite let her in. Her dress, tight and beaded, clung to her like an apology she refused to make. When her eyes met mine, they flared with something too complex for a wedding day, recognition mixed with calculation. A predator scenting the familiar weakness of its kin, she didn't walk toward me. She summoned me with a flick of her wrist like I was a staffer. "Everyone," she sang out, her voice sugar-coated venom. "This is my older sister, Camille. The war pig who thinks she's a soldier." Laughter rippled through the crowd like champagne bubbles, light, mocking, oblivious. A few looked at me, trying to gauge whether it was a joke or just good old-fashioned public shaming. I smiled gently, the way you smile at someone about to learn a lesson the hard way. "I've been called worse," I wanted to say, but I just nodded and said, "Congratulations." Celia's new husband, Julian Langford III, yes, the third, as though that pedigree were something forged in battle, stood beside her, his smile tight. He didn't laugh, he didn't defend me either, just looked past me as if I were part of the furniture that hadn't been ordered. But the general saw me. He was there too, Julian's father, retired Lieutenant General Albert Langford, silver hair, clean medals on his chest, posture still stiff with decades of command. His eyes narrowed slightly when I walked past him. He knew my name, not from family gossip, from something else, something older, something real. He didn't say anything, just nodded once. Not recognition, respect. I walked on. No one knew my full story, not even Celia. Especially not Celia. She thought I was a desk jockey in fatigues, barking orders about canned goods and vehicle repair schedules. Logistics officer? That was the term she once used with a sneer, like it was just fancy talk for military secretary. But she hadn't been there when we rerouted convoys through flood zones in coast, when one missed shipment meant an entire field hospital would go dark. She wasn't there when I ran operations during the Kandahar base lockdown, or when I spent 3 days awake sorting a failed intel recovery. She never saw the men I pulled out of a burning Humvee, using nothing but a fire blanket and an unshakable hand. She never saw me break, but she tried damn hard to bend me. After my husband Caleb died in a training explosion, I disappeared for a while. Not physically, I still showed up at base, still clocked the hours, still filed the reports, but something in me went hollow. The kind of hollow that hums, like a shell casing. I filled it with order. I found peace in structure, in spreadsheets, in supply chain resilience. While Celia was posting brunches in Venice, I was securing perishable medical shipments from Germany to the Sahel in under 72 hours. But that never made her feed. My inheritance went untouched. I didn't buy a loft in New York, didn't invest in doomed skincare startups. Instead, I sank it into a logistics firm working with underfunded UN missions. Quiet money. Clean paper trail, no press releases, no red carpets, just impact. The Langfords, they knew the difference. General Langford knew. And he kept glancing at me like he was replaying an old mission briefing in his head. I knew that look, and I knew the danger. I drifted through the wedding crowd, speaking little, observing much. The women wore gowns with names I couldn't pronounce, and the men had hands like dry paper, crisp, perfumed, harmless. Servers floated by with tiny dishes of things I couldn't identify: foams, spheres, amuse-bouches that barely filled a tooth. A woman in silk asked if I was still in the army. I said yes, logistics division. She nodded vaguely, already turning away before I finished my sentence. Civilians were like that. They wanted hero stories or horror stories. They couldn't comprehend the quiet machinery that kept the world from falling apart. Let them stay ignorant. I had nothing to prove. But the general was watching me. Again. And that's when I saw it, the whisper between glances. He leaned toward Julian, murmured something. Julian's eyes flicked to me, then narrowed. I could read lips well enough. Fort Creekside, supply optimization, Camille Hunt. My pulse didn't spike, my face didn't shift. But something deep in my spine went still. He knew. They were connecting the dots. It was only a matter of time before Celia did too, and that's what scared me more than anything. Because Celia wasn't interested in truth. She was interested in leverage, and now I had value. I stepped outside for air. The back terrace of Halberd overlooked a manicured lawn with stone fountains and lavender hedges. The sky was perfect, of course it was. Celia wouldn't have allowed anything less. But even in that postcard setting, I felt the static. The storm behind the smiles. The tilt in the air when predators sniff opportunity. My fingers clenched the glass of mineral water like it was a tether. This was supposed to be a day off. But my body didn't believe it. My shoulders still squared like a woman on inspection. My breath still shallow, measured, ready. Years in uniform make your nervous system obey, even when the dress code changes. Inside, laughter flared again. Celia, telling some story, probably about how I once wore a dress uniform to Thanksgiving. Probably forgot to mention that I had come straight from base after a medevac drill. Didn't matter. The story wasn't about facts. It was about hierarchy. Always had been. She knew how to climb. She didn't know what it meant to hold the rope when others fell. And she never once considered that I might not be below her anymore. But I was fine with that. I'd been underestimated before. It never lasted long. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear. I'd long since taught myself how to survive on 4 hours of fragmented rest, the kind of broken sleep that still leaves you sharp enough to brief a general before sunrise. But that night I stayed awake because my mind was moving too quickly. Not anxious, strategizing. Celia had found out, not everything, not yet, but enough. Enough to start spinning her webs. By morning, I'd already received her message. Just one sentence. Lunch this week, Cam? Julian and I have a few ideas we'd love to chat about for the family's future. Kiss mark, I stared at it with the same expression I once wore watching a convoy reroute through mine-laced roads in Helmand. There was no curiosity in the text, no sisterly affection. Just a business proposition dressed up in pearls. That phrase, family's future, I'd heard her use it before. It always meant one thing: money. She must have connected the dots between my military career and my quiet portfolio. She must have found out about my silent stake in Atlas Convoy, the logistics contractor I'd invested in just after Caleb died. I remembered the meeting clearly. A modest startup led by a former NCO with steel in his eyes and spreadsheets that made sense. I didn't gamble, I bet on competence. Atlas Convoy had grown fast, quietly, ethically. And when it landed a contract with Fort Creekside, my modest investment had tripled in value. All legal, all disclosed through the proper JAG channels. I'd never taken a cent I hadn't earned. But Celia wouldn't care about ethics, she never had. She cared about leverage, and now I had it. I met them for lunch at a place called Canton Row, where waiters wore tuxedo vests and the menu didn't have prices. Julian stood to greet me like he was interviewing a defense contractor. Celia air-kissed both my cheeks, then motioned to the third chair like she was doing me a favor. "Camille, darling," she said, "you look so composed." It wasn't a compliment. Julian launched right in. "We've been thinking about the future, legacy, sustainability. And we thought, well, who better to build something enduring than you?" I blinked once. "You mean me?" Celia smiled, slow and shark-like. "You've built something remarkable, all under the radar, very clever. Daddy would be proud. Daddy." She never called him that unless she wanted something. They pushed a folder across the table, thin, elegant, cream-colored with embossed gold trim. Inside were trust documents, shell corporations, estate management proposals, and something called the Hunt Family Opportunity Vehicle. I flipped it closed without reading. "No," I said simply. Julian frowned. "Don't you even want to know the terms?" "I know the terms," I said. "They're written in ink, but they reek of desperation." Celia's voice tightened. "Camille, we're trying to include you. You've always been so isolated. This is a chance to finally be part of something." "You mean your thing," I corrected. "Not mine." Julian leaned forward. With your reputation, your contacts in the military industrial sector, and our access to capital, we could build. Stop. My voice was calm, like a morning roll call. You don't have access to capital, you have debt. You don't have influence, you have Instagram followers. You don't want partnership, you want control. That landed. Julian's nostrils flared. Celia stared at me as if I'd just slapped her. I didn't come here to be manipulated, I continued. I came because I wanted to see just how far you'd fall before you asked for help. You didn't disappoint. Celia's voice wobbled. Why are you being like this? Like what? Honest, the silence between us was colder than the iced water in our glasses. Finally, she reached into her bag and pulled out a glossy pamphlet. A fake charity gala, scheduled for fall. Langford Hunt Foundation. Bridging Families and Futures. My name was already printed in the opening line of the event description. You were going to use me before you even asked. Her lips twitched. It's marketing, Cam. No one reads those things. Your problem is that you think everything is marketing. Julian tried again, softening his tone. Camille, let's not make this adversarial. If we all come together, I stood up. You already made it adversarial. You did that the moment you hired someone to pull my financial disclosures. His face went pale. Celia hissed, You don't have proof. I smiled. Of course I do. Do you think I wouldn't track the firm who pinged my shell companies last Tuesday? You're not clever, Celia. You're just loud. The waiter arrived with our food. No one touched it. I left them sitting there in the wreckage of their politeness. Outside, the sky was a hard blue. I took a breath and called my lawyer. Howard Tran had been my advisor since Caleb's accident. He wasn't flashy. Didn't wear designer suits. But his paperwork was flawless, and his voice never changed tone. Not when we buried Caleb, not when we liquidated joint accounts, not when I asked him to structure 5 LLCs that could withstand a family hurricane. I need a firewall, I told him. You already have one, he replied, but I'll reinforce it. By the next morning, he had everything. Copies of the inquiries made into my holdings, screenshots of Celia's newly opened lines of credit, and a photo of Julian at a fundraiser speaking to a consultant who specialized in estate asset coercion. You're not their sister anymore, Howard said. You're a line item, a lifeboat. I didn't flinch. I've been in worse battles. But you've never fought on this terrain, he warned. Family attacks from within, no rules. No Geneva Convention. I closed the file folder he'd handed me. Then I'll make my own rules. 2 days later, a courier dropped off another invitation. This one on thicker cardstock, printed in raised ink with a gold foil crest that looked like it belonged on a bottle of overpriced champagne. A family wealth planning dinner. RSVP requested. Guest of honor, Camille Hunt. I didn't shred it, I archived it. Evidence. And then I sat down at my dining table and began to draft what every mission needs, a contingency plan. I opened a blank page in my notebook and titled it, Operation. Glass house underneath, I wrote, confirm JAG filings. Log every contact attempt. Prepare counter-disclosure packet. Notify command of potential smear campaign. Maintain discipline. No visible escalation. Then, a final line, bold and underlined, let them think you're still the quiet one. That Sunday, I went for a run around the base perimeter trail. The air was dry and sharp. The sun low enough to cast long shadows behind the fence lines. Each step cleared the noise in my head. This wasn't about revenge. It was about resilience. About setting a boundary that would hold when everything else bent to power and pressure. I didn't want Celia's apology. I didn't need Julian's respect. I just needed the truth to be louder than the spin, because I wasn't the woman Celia thought she could publicly humiliate anymore. I was the woman who'd kept an entire division running during an embassy evacuation, who'd once rerouted a broken supply chain through 2 continents using only satellite pings and a gut instinct about human greed. Let them come, let them try. I was already 3 steps ahead. 3 days after the family wealth dinner, a sealed envelope landed on my kitchen table. Inside, confirmation from JAG, everything filed, everything clean, no violations, no gray areas. Just a single line from the Inspector General's office that read, This office finds no grounds for investigation or concern. Maintain records, remain vigilant. I smiled, not because it was over, but because it meant I had officially outmaneuvered them. Celia had expected drama. A scandal, maybe, some teary breakdown where I threw a glass or stormed out of the country club. She had never understood me. Not then, not now. I didn't break down. I built walls, quiet ones. Lined with facts, reinforced with disclosure. That evening, I received a voicemail from Dylan, our younger cousin. He sounded tentative, like someone trying to translate a dream they didn't quite understand. Celia's freaking out. She says you humiliated her in front of Julian's father, says you threatened legal action. What's going on? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I typed out a message. Tell her this, I didn't humiliate her. I protected myself. That's what soldiers do, we hold the line. The next day, I received an email from her lawyer. Short, blunt. My clients withdraw all current inquiries into Miss Hunt's financial history. No further action will be taken. We consider the matter closed. I saved it, printed it, filed it under proof they bluffed first. And then I exhaled, not in relief, but in readiness. It's strange what comes after a battle. Not victory, not celebration, just stillness. A silence you earn. The kind that doesn't feel empty, it feels earned. I stood at my window that night with a cup of black coffee cooling in my hand. Outside, the base lights blinked in their usual rhythm. Trucks moved across the lot like tired giants, steady and unbothered. A familiar calm settled in my chest, the kind I only ever felt after long missions. The paperwork was done. The traps had been disarmed. And the perimeter was still holding. Inside, my binder sat on the kitchen table, filled with timelines, emails, and every thread of evidence I'd collected over the past few weeks. But I didn't look at it like a shield anymore. I looked at it like a memory, not of pain, of discipline. 1 week later, I received the call from the command office. A new post, Colorado Springs, promotion, major. New command, strategic logistics for Mountain Division. I accepted before the sentence even finished. It wasn't about running from the mess. It was about stepping forward into something untainted, something I chose. That night, I opened a fresh notebook. At the top, I wrote, The Ward Initiative. It had started as an idea I scribbled down years ago in a hotel room in Germany. A scholarship fund for military families, children of enlisted parents, spouses re-entering the workforce. No red tape, no performative charity, just direct support. Now, with my name cleared, my record stronger than ever, and my faith in systems, ironically, renewed, I knew it was time. Howard helped me structure the foundation. Transparent, unassailable, bulletproof. I set up an office near base. Just one room, 2 desks, and a filing cabinet that still smelled like fresh pine. I kept things simple. 1 assistant, 1 accountant, and a mission that couldn't be twisted into anyone else's vanity project. Celia tried to call once. I didn't answer, not out of spite, but because there was nothing more to say. She'd had her chance to be my sister. She chose to be an adversary. And I'd responded like I always do, with facts, not fury. With action, not accusation. On my first day at the new post, I wore my dress uniform, pressed to perfection. My ribbons pinned, my hair tied tight. The commanding officer shook my hand and said, "We're lucky to have you." I nodded. I didn't smile, not because I wasn't proud, but because pride for me wasn't performance. It was process. It was the quiet knowing that every file in that JAG drawer, every spreadsheet I'd built in war zones, every decision I'd made without applause had led to this. The calm, the clarity, the choice, I never did go back to Halberd House. I imagine Celia's still there, throwing some gala, sipping something gold, posing beside chandeliers. That's her battlefield, not mine. I found mine in convoy schedules and emergency supply reroutes, and now, in handwritten scholarship applications from children whose names she'll never know. That's legacy. Not press releases, but precision, not gold leaf, but grit. And if I've learned anything, it's this. Revenge is loud. Boundaries are quiet. And the quiet ones? We're the ones still standing when the storm passes. As I sit here now, in Colorado Springs, overlooking the Rocky Mountains with a fresh stack of scholarship letters in my inbox, I realize I don't need a victory lap. I just need the next mission. Because this life, this honest, disciplined, resilient life, isn't about proving Celia wrong. It's about proving every day that I was never the pig in the story. I was the soldier. And soldiers, we never stop moving forward.